My name is Margaret Hayes, I am 69 years old, and today I sign payroll checks for more than 200 employees across 3 senior wellness residences in Texas. The glass walls of my office look out over oak trees and a quiet garden where residents walk slowly in the morning sun, wrapped in soft blankets we buy in bulk and wash with care. Every corner smells faintly of lavender and warm bread from the kitchen downstairs. People see this life now and think I have always been powerful, always respected, always comfortable. They have no idea that, not so long ago, I was shivering on a plastic mattress in a room that smelled like bleach and mold, begging for just one extra blanket and being treated like I was asking for too much. Today I want to tell you the story of that night, and of everything that came before and after it. This is the story of how my only son threw me away like broken furniture, how a cheap nursing home tried to erase my dignity to squeeze one more dollar out of my body, and how the simple act of asking for a blanket uncovered something so shameful in my room that it changed the course of many lives, including my own. I am not exaggerating when I say that if that nurse had not snapped at me, if she had not yanked open my drawer with that angry, impatient hand, I might still be there, invisible and forgotten. Or worse. The night that changed everything was one of the coldest nights of January 3 years ago. The heating system in the nursing home had been under maintenance for weeks, which really meant the owners didn't want to pay for proper repairs. The air felt heavy and damp, and every breath I took came out in a weak white puff that disappeared almost immediately. My hands ached deep in the bones, my fingers swollen and stiff from the cold and from the arthritis I had developed after 40 years as a nurse. The thin, scratchy blanket they gave me might as well have been a paper towel. I could feel every hard spring of the mattress digging into my hips. I lay there on my side, facing the wall, staring at the cracked paint. The fluorescent light in the hallway flickered under the door, pulsing like a tired heartbeat. Somewhere down the corridor, a television blared a late-night talk show, the canned laughter spilling into the silence of our rooms. A woman in the next room coughed in long, rattling bursts, then groaned for help that never came. The smell of reheated cabbage from dinner still clung to the air, mixed with urine and disinfectant. It was the kind of smell you don't forget, the kind that seeps into your hair, your clothes, your memories. "Excuse me," I whispered at first, my voice barely louder than my own breathing. No one answered. The call bell attached to my bed had been broken for 2 days. They always had a reason why things were broken. Too many residents, not enough money, not enough staff. There were always excuses, but never solutions. I swallowed, felt my throat burn, and tried again, louder this time. "Hello? Nurse? Please. I need another blanket." For a moment, nothing moved. Then I heard the sharp, irritated squeak of rubber soles on the waxed floor, coming closer. The footsteps did not sound like help was coming. They sounded like someone being dragged away from whatever they considered more important than an old woman's comfort. My heart began to beat faster, not from hope, but from a familiar mixture of shame and fear. I hated needing anything from these people. I hated how small and weak I felt when I had to ask. The door swung open with a jolt that made the frame rattle. Harsh white light flooded into the room, stabbing my eyes. I blinked, raising a hand to shield my face. A tall figure in pale blue scrubs stood in the doorway, one hand on her hip, the other still on the handle. Her name tag read Brenda, though in my mind I had come to think of her simply as the cold one. "What is it now, Ms. Hayes?" she snapped, her voice flat and tired, but edged with annoyance. "You already got your meds. It's past rounds." I'm sorry," I said, instinctively. It still surprises me how quickly apologies fall out of my mouth, even when I have done nothing wrong. It's just... I can't stop shaking. "Could I please have one more blanket?" "Just one. I'm freezing." She exhaled loudly through her nose, the way people do when they are trying very hard to show they have no patience left. She stepped inside, letting the door slam against the stopper with a thud. Her perfume, cheap, very sweet, like artificial strawberries, battled with the smell of disinfectant in the room. "We don't have extra blankets for everyone," she said. "You're not the only one here, you know." If I bring you another one, the others will start asking too. Then what? You think this is a hotel? Her words hit harder than she probably intended, but maybe that was exactly how she intended them. You think this is a hotel? As if I had chosen to be there. As if I were some spoiled guest complaining about the view, instead of a widowed nurse who had spent decades caring for other people's parents and grandparents, now left in a place where my basic needs were considered a burden. I understand, I murmured, my teeth chattering so hard I bit my tongue. I tasted a metallic hint of blood. But maybe there is one blanket somewhere, an old one, I can share with someone. I don't mind. I just... Ms. Hayes, she cut in, her tone even colder, you have a blanket right there on your bed. And I know there was an extra one delivered to this room last week. I remember, because I signed for the linens. Maybe you misplaced it. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the dim room, the metal bed, the tiny nightstand, the narrow dresser, and the single chair by the window with its paint peeling from the legs. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest. My hands, buried under the thin blanket, curled into fists. I didn't misplace anything, I said softly, though even as I spoke, I knew my voice sounded small, defensive, the voice of someone who no longer expects to be believed. There was an extra blanket, but... But what? She demanded, taking a step closer. The soles of her shoes squeaked again against the floor. You residents hide things all the time and then call us liars. I am not going to get written up because you can't keep track of your sheets. She turned toward the small dresser against the wall, the one piece of furniture that still felt like it was mine. The top drawer held my folded pajamas and underwear. The second drawer contained a neat stack of old photographs, my wedding picture, my son's first day of school, my parents standing in front of their little house, and my late husband's watch, wrapped carefully in a handkerchief. The bottom drawer was where I kept the few things that still gave me the illusion of control, a notebook with my handwriting covering every page, my old nursing license, and a folder of documents I had been too afraid to show anyone. Don't, I blurted, my voice suddenly sharp, cutting through the air. Please don't go through my things. There's nothing in there for you to. She shot me a look over her shoulder, a mixture of suspicion and irritation. If you really don't have another blanket, then you won't mind if I check, will you? She said. Because I'm not getting into trouble for missing inventory. They already accuse us of stealing enough as it is. Her hand wrapped around the small metal handle of the top drawer. For a moment, I considered sitting up, throwing off the blanket, and physically stopping her. But my joints protested at the very thought of sudden movement. My wrist still bore a faint yellow bruise from where another aide had grabbed me a week before when I moved too slowly. I stayed where I was, my body rigid, my mind racing. You don't understand, I wanted to say. It's not just clothes in there. It's my life. It's everything I have left. Instead, I whispered, please, be careful. She yanked the drawer open with more force than necessary. Inside, my carefully folded clothes shifted, a pair of socks spilling over the edge. No blankets. Her mouth tightened. See? I said quickly. There's nothing extra. I told you. She ignored me and moved to the second drawer. I held my breath as she pulled it open. The soft rustle of old photographs brushed against each other. The dim hallway light fell across my wedding picture, the colors faded but the joy unmistakable. In it, I stood next to James in my simple white dress, his hand resting proudly at the small of my back. I saw her eyes flick over the picture, uninterested. Her fingers brushed the corner of the handkerchief that held his watch. Just pictures, she muttered, already bored. You people and your clutter. A hot, protective anger flared in me. That clutter was my marriage, my memories, my proof that I had once been more than room 214. I almost told her to stop again, but she had already moved on, bending down toward the bottom drawer. My heart began to pound so hard I could hear it in my ears. The bottom drawer was the one I never let anyone touch. Because in that drawer, under my notebook and license, were the documents Daniel and Lauren had made me sign for my own good 2 days before they dumped me at Oakview Retirement Center. The power of attorney forms. The deed transfer. The bank authorizations. My whole financial life, drained into their hands with a few lines of fine print and my shaky signature at the bottom. And next to those papers, half hidden under a folded cardigan, were things the nursing home administrators absolutely did not want anyone outside to see: unpaid pharmacy bills, duplicated insurance claims with my name on them, and photographs another resident's grandson had secretly taken of our bruises and bedsores on his phone, then printed for me in black and white. Evidence. Proof. Shame. Stop, I said, more urgently now. Brenda, please. There's personal stuff in there. It's private. She scoffed and jerked the drawer open. The smell hit her first. A sour, rotting odor that had nothing to do with the cleaning chemicals. Her nose wrinkled. Even from my bed, I felt my stomach twist as the familiar scent rose into the air and wrapped around us both. It was the smell of the food tray I had hidden in there 2 nights earlier, the dinner they had forgotten to pick up, the milk left to sour, the piece of chicken that had fallen off the plate and slid down between the drawer and the frame. I had tried to reach it, but my hands couldn't get far enough inside. When I told the night aide, she rolled her eyes and said, "Just leave it, someone will get it tomorrow." No one ever did. Brenda recoiled, one hand flying to cover her mouth. "What the?" she spat, her voice high with disgust. "Are you kidding me, Ms. Hayes? What is this?" The light from the hallway spilled directly into the open drawer now, illuminating everything I had tried, in my own clumsy way, to keep safe. On top, my notebook lay open, its pages filled with tightly written lines, numbers, ideas, budget sketches. A stack of pharmacy envelopes bulged beneath it, stamped with red past due marks. Along the side, the edge of a manila folder peeked out, its corner stained from where the spilled milk had soaked through. A printed photograph, curled from humidity, showed a close-up of an old woman's upper arm, purple and yellow bruises in the shape of fingers. And there, half buried under a cardigan and a grocery bag, was the small, crumpled extra blanket they had lost from my room a week earlier, its edges still marked with the black laundry coat of Oakview. Streaks of dried brown, old gravy from the untouched meal, crossed the fabric. A few dead flies clung to it near the corner. Brenda stared at it all, her eyes wide now, her earlier boredom replaced by something else entirely, alarm. "Jesus," she muttered. "This is a health violation. Food in the dresser? Dirty linens? No wonder your room smells." Her gaze flicked from the drawer to my face, suddenly sharper, more calculating. "If state inspectors see this, we're all screwed." I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. The words health violation echoed in my mind like an accusation. In that moment, it didn't matter that I had tried to get someone to clean it up, that my arthritic hands couldn't pull the drawer all the way out, that I hadn't asked for the extra blanket to be stuffed there in the first place. All that mattered was how it looked, an old woman hoarding dirty food and linens in her drawer. I couldn't reach the plate, I stammered. "I told the night aide 2 days ago. She said she would come back. Nobody came. I couldn't. I didn't put the blanket there either, Save it," Brenda snapped, but her voice had lost some of its edge. She wasn't just annoyed anymore, she was nervous. "If the supervisor comes in here, she'll say it's my fault for not checking your room. And if the administrator finds out, they'll all blame the staff. They always do." Her eyes darted to the hallway, then back to the drawer. That was when she saw the papers more clearly. Her gaze fell on the top of the manila folder, where the bold letters "Durable Power of Attorney" were clearly visible. She frowned and reached in, pushing aside the spoiled tray with a grimace. A piece of congealed gravy smeared across her glove. She swore under her breath, then grabbed the corner of the folder and pulled it free. "Don't touch that," I said, my voice trembling. My heart was beating so fast it hurt. "Please, Brenda. Those are my documents." She ignored me and flipped the folder open with her thumb. Her eyes moved quickly over the first page, then slowed. I watched her lips soundlessly form the words, Principal, Margaret and Hayes. Agent, Daniel Christopher Hayes. She looked back at me, and for the first time since she had entered the room, there was something like curiosity in her expression. Something that looked dangerously close to human concern. "This your son?" she asked, tapping the page with her gloved finger. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. "Yes," I whispered. "That's Daniel." She turned another page. Her eyes widened a fraction. "Says here he has full control over your bank accounts, your house, your medical decisions, everything." The words hung between us, heavier than any blanket could ever be. "He said it was for my safety," I replied, the shame thick in my throat. "He told me, Mom, this way I can protect you from scams. It's just routine paperwork." I didn't read all of it. I trusted him. Brenda flipped through more pages, her brow furrowing deeper with each line she skimmed. There were bank statements with my name at the top and a zero balance at the bottom. There were printouts of insurance claims billed at premium care rates, though I slept on a bare mattress with one thin blanket. There were notes in someone else's neat handwriting, Lauren's, I recognized it instantly, about transferring her ASAP and liquidating remaining assets. In the silence that followed, I could hear the television laugh track again, distant and tinny. Somewhere down the hall, a resident moaned and was shushed. The fluorescent light hummed overhead. My fingers, still clutching the edge of my own blanket, began to tremble harder, not from the cold this time, but from the raw, exposed feeling of having my last secrets dragged into the open. Brenda slowly lifted her eyes from the papers to meet mine. "Does anyone else know about this?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "No. My son doesn't visit. His wife hates me. The administrator here told me not to worry about complicated documents and to focus on resting. I kept everything in that drawer because it was the only place that still felt like mine. The only place I could look at and say, this is my life. It happened." She glanced back at the open drawer, at the mix of rotten food, stolen linens, bruised photographs, legal forms, and that little notebook that had my biggest, most foolish dream written on its very first page. A dream I had almost forgotten, a different kind of home for elders, one where no one had to beg for a blanket. For a long moment, she said nothing. The silence pressed against my ears. Then she closed the folder, her movements slower now, more deliberate. She set it carefully on top of the dresser, away from the spoiled tray and the dirty blanket. Her shoulders sagged just a bit, as if the weight of what she had seen was settling in. "You're not supposed to have all this," she muttered, but there was no real scolding in her tone anymore. "If state comes, they'll ask a lot of questions. About the food. About billing. About why your son signed over everything and then dumped you here." She looked at me again, and this time her gaze was searching, almost pleading. "Do you want someone to ask questions, Ms. Hayes?" My breath caught in my chest. No one had ever asked me that. Not my son, not the administrator, not any of the aides who rushed in and out of my room without looking at my face. For months, everything had been done to me, around me, over my head. Papers shoved under my pen. Decisions made in offices where I was never invited. Orders barked. Pills handed out. Doors closed. "Do you want someone to ask questions?" I stared at her, at the tight lines around her mouth, at the faint shadows under her eyes. She was part of the machine that had crushed me, but in that moment she also looked like a woman who had seen too much and slept too little. A woman who might be more afraid than cruel. My voice shook when I finally answered. "Yes," I said. "I do. I don't know what good it will do now, but yes. I want someone to see what's happening here. I want someone to know what my son did. I want this to mean something." Brenda swallowed, her gaze flicking once more to the hallway. When she spoke again, her voice was low, barely above a whisper. Then you didn't just need a blanket tonight, she said. You needed a witness. She took off one soiled glove, then the other, dropping them into the small trash bin by the door. Without another word, she walked out, leaving the drawer open and the documents exposed on the dresser. For a terrifying second, I thought she was abandoning me to the cold and the mess. My chest tightened. But a moment later, I heard her voice in the hall, sharper now, calling for someone. Not the usual lazy call for another aide to deal with a difficult resident, but a name I hadn't heard before. Carla, she said. Get social work down here. Room 214. Now. I lay there, heart pounding, bones still aching from the cold, staring at the open drawer that held my whole ruined life. I had asked for a blanket and instead uncovered mold, bruises, and crimes written in ink. I had wanted warmth and received something far more dangerous, attention. And in that moment, wrapped in my thin, scratchy blanket, I had no idea that this humiliating discovery in my tiny room would be the first thread pulled from a much larger tapestry. I didn't know that my son's betrayal and this nursing home's greed were tightly woven together in a scheme that would soon unravel in front of lawyers, reporters, and judges. I certainly didn't know that the notebook in that drawer, the one filled with my impossible ideas, would one day turn into a business worth millions. All I knew was that someone was finally coming to look. To listen. To ask questions. And you? Have you ever been in a place where you felt so small, so cold, that you convinced yourself you didn't deserve to ask for more than the bare minimum, until one tiny request ripped the curtain off a truth much bigger than you? If you have, then you already know, what began with a blanket in that dirty drawer was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning. By then, Oakview felt like a battlefield after the smoke has started to clear. The investigators had come and gone multiple times. Charts had been pulled, copied, and pulled again. 2 nurses and 1 administrator had resigned suddenly. A quiet tension hummed under everything. I had grown stronger in small but important ways. Physical therapy, real physical therapy, not just a box checked on a form, had finally started after Ms. Chen's report highlighted the discrepancy between what was billed and what was provided. Twice a week, a young therapist named Alicia worked with me in the narrow rehab room at the end of the hall, coaxing my stiff joints into motion, measuring my progress down to the degree. Your balance is better, she said one morning as I slowly climbed 3 shallow steps with her at my side. 3 months ago, you clung to the railing like the floor was on fire. Now look at you. I looked down at my feet, at the way they moved more surely than before, and felt a small bloom of pride. My body was not what it used to be, but it was not useless either. It was adapting. What I didn't know yet was that my life was about to adapt too. Carla brought the envelope into my room, holding it carefully, like it was something fragile and potentially explosive at the same time. This is from your attorney, she said. They asked me to give it to you in person. My fingers trembled slightly as I took it. The paper was thick, the kind used for important things. I'll step out and give you privacy, she added. If you want to talk after, I'll be down the hall. I nodded, unable to find my voice. When she left, closing the door softly behind her, the room seemed to shrink and expand at once. The ticking of the old wall clock grew loud. I could hear the faint hiss of the radiator, the distant rattle of a cart. I slid my finger under the sealed flap and opened the envelope. Inside was a multi-page letter, printed in dense paragraphs. I started reading, my eyes scanning the legal phrases. Following extensive review of bank statements, property records, and facility billing. Evidence indicates a clear pattern of unauthorized transfers and exploitative use of durable power of attorney. As part of a negotiated settlement, without admission of guilt, the following terms have been agreed upon. My eyes blurred. I blinked, wiped them with the back of my hand, and forced myself to slow down. The numbers were there, staring up at me in black ink. The proceeds from the sale of my house, plus interest. The return of funds transferred from my retirement accounts into Daniel's personal investments. Additional damages for emotional distress and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. A separate settlement from Oakview's parent company for fraudulent billing and neglect, part of a larger class action involving multiple residents. When all of it was added up, minus legal fees, the total came to just over $3,400,000. I sat very still, the paper trembling in my hands. $3.4 million. For most of my life, my relationship with money had been simple. I worked, I got paid, I used the money to survive and occasionally to buy something nice on sale. The idea of being wealthy had always belonged to other people, doctors with private practices, executives in tall buildings, lottery winners on television. But there it was. A number that suddenly yanked me into a different category. The letter went on to explain that Daniel and Lauren had agreed to avoid criminal charges in exchange for full restitution and a formal admission of wrongdoing in a sealed court record. The nursing home chain had paid out to avoid a public trial that could have destroyed them completely. It wasn't just about the money. It was about something I had never thought I would see, my son being forced to face the consequences of his decisions in a setting where his charm and excuses could not save him. My eyes lingered on one line. Mr. Daniel Hayes acknowledges that his actions constituted a breach of fiduciary duty and caused significant harm to his mother, Margaret Hayes. Those words were like stitches pulled tight across a deep wound. I read the letter to the end and then sat back, staring at the ceiling. $3.4 million. At first, my mind went blank. Then, slowly, thoughts began to trickle in. I could leave Oakview. Immediately. I could move into an apartment of my choice, hire in-home care, decorate the walls with whatever color I wanted. I could travel, if my body allowed. Visit the ocean James and I had always meant to see together but never had time. I could donate to charities, set up scholarships, fund better training programs for nurses. So many possibilities, all whispering at once. But one thought rose above the rest, clear and insistent. If I ran a nursing home. I looked over at my notebook on the nightstand, the worn cover peeking out from under a stack of magazines. Was it insane to think I could do something with that dream now? At nearly 70, with arthritis and a limp and a heart patched together with grief and anger? Was it foolish to believe that I could build anything more than a comfortable retirement for myself? Maybe. But insanity and foolishness had built many of the world's most important things. And I had something else too, knowledge. The kind you earn in sweat and tears, not classrooms. Carla knocked gently and stepped back in. Well, she asked, her eyes searching my face. I handed her the letter. She read it quickly, her eyebrows climbing as she moved down the page. When she reached the total settlement amount, she exhaled softly. Wow, she said. That's substantial. I didn't even know I had that much to lose, I said, my voice trembling with a strange mixture of awe and bitterness. You shouldn't have had to lose it to get it back, she replied. Then, more quietly, and not everyone in your situation does. I nodded. What happens now? I asked. Legally, the funds will be transferred into accounts you control, with oversight as needed, she explained. You'll have to decide where you want to live, what kind of care you want, how you want to structure things. The attorneys can help with the technical side. She paused. But the bigger question is, she added, what do you want your life to look like from here on out? I stared at the letter, then at my notebook. I don't know if it's possible, I began slowly. But I wrote something a while ago. Ideas. About how senior care should be. Not like this. Different. Dignified. Transparent. Human. Carla's eyes brightened. You showed me some of those notes, she said. They were good. Very good. What if, I swallowed. What if I used some of this money to start something? Not a giant chain. Just one place. One home that does it right. The words sounded fragile in the air, like a glass ornament that might shatter at the slightest touch. Carla didn't laugh. She didn't call it unrealistic. Instead, she tilted her head, considering. It would be hard, she said honestly. Regulations, staffing, real estate, insurance. But it's not impossible. Especially if you partner with people who have experience on the business side. I don't have a degree in business, I said. You have 40 years of bedside experience, she countered. You know what residents need. You know what staff need. Find someone who knows spreadsheets and let them worry about that. You provide the vision. Vision. It was a word usually reserved for younger people with glossy pitch decks. Hearing it applied to me felt both strange and thrilling. Even if I tried, I said, who would take me seriously? Carla smiled. There are more people out there hungry for real change in elder care than you think, she said. Investors, advocates, even some younger administrators who are sick of the old model. And you have something they don't. What's that? I asked. Proof, she said simply. You lived the consequences of a broken system. You exposed it. You won. That story alone has power. I looked down at my hands, at the faint scars and veins, at the way they shook slightly in moments of strong emotion. These hands had changed bedpans, held dying patients, signed away my life, and now, maybe, could sign something new into existence. Do you really think I can do this? I asked. Carla met my eyes. I think the question is, she said softly, do you really think you're allowed to? Her words struck a nerve I hadn't realized was exposed. Allowed. For years, I had lived inside invisible borders drawn by duty and guilt. I was allowed to give, not to receive. Allowed to sacrifice, not to dream. Allowed to survive, not to build. But those borders had been drawn by people who benefited from them. By a son who preferred my silence. By a system that preferred compliant patients. Who said I had to follow those lines? I want to try, I heard myself say. I don't know how, but I want to try. Carla nodded, her eyes shining. Then let's start with step 1, she said. We'll get you out of here. The logistics took a few more weeks. Papers were signed. Funds were transferred. A small team, my lawyer, a financial planner, and a representative from a reputable home care agency, met with me in a conference room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and furniture polish. I chose to move into a modest but bright 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It had an elevator, wide doorways, and a balcony that overlooked a park. For the first time in years, I could choose the color of the walls, soft sage in the living room, pale blue in the bedroom, and the kind of blankets on my bed, thick, cotton, in rich jewel tones. The day I left Oakview, I sat in the lobby with my suitcase and my notebook on my lap. Residents shuffled by, some waving. Rose squeezed my hand. Go cause trouble somewhere better, she said with a crooked smile. Maria hugged me tightly, her eyes wet. Don't forget us, she whispered. Tell people what happens here. I will, I promised. As the transport van pulled away, I looked back at the brick building shrinking in the rearview mirror. Part of me felt like I was abandoning the people I was leaving behind. But another part understood that I could do more for them from outside those walls than inside them. Sometimes, to fight a system, you have to step out of its belly. The first weeks in my new apartment were strange and disorienting. I woke up at night expecting to hear carts rattling and call bells beeping. Instead, there were only the faint sounds of cars passing on the street below and leaves rustling in the trees. My home care aide, a kind woman named Shonda, came in the mornings to help with bathing, meals, and light cleaning. She treated me like an employer and a human being, not a burden. We developed a comfortable rhythm. With my basic needs met, my mind had room for something it hadn't had in a long time, imagination. I spread my notebook, the settlement letter, and a stack of printouts across my dining table. I read articles about innovative senior living models, small household care homes, and cooperative ownership structures. I watched interviews with geriatric care experts, economists, and even a few entrepreneurs who had left corporate jobs to open care facilities that didn't feel like warehouses. 3 Patterns emerged on the pages. The facilities that worked best had a few things in common: smaller resident numbers, empowered staff, transparent finances, strong community ties. They cost money, but they spent it where it mattered rather than on marble lobbies. 2 I started sketching. How many residents? I wrote. I knew from experience that 40 or 50 residents per wing was too many. People got lost in the shuffle. Corners got cut. 20 per building, I wrote. Maximum. With staff who know every name. I listed what kind of staff I would need: nurses, aides, cooks, cleaning, an activities coordinator, a social worker. I calculated rough salaries, benefits, training costs. I added a line for emotional support and burnout prevention, something my generation of nurses never got. As I worked, a name surfaced in my mind. Jameson House. James's middle name had been Jameson. He used to joke that if he ever went into private practice, he would put Jameson Care on the door because it sounded like a whiskey brand and might make patients feel braver. I smiled at the memory. Jameson House, I wrote at the top of the page. Senior Wellness Residence. Mission: dignity as standard, not as upgrade. I knew I couldn't do this alone. So, with shaky hands but a clear head, I made a call. Carla? I said when she picked up. I have a question. Do you know anyone who understands both elder care and business? Someone who might be crazy enough to help a 70-year-old woman start something new? She laughed softly. I might, she said. I'll make some calls. Within a month, I was sitting in a coffee shop with a man in his early 40s wearing rolled-up sleeves and glasses. His name was David Patel. He had spent 15 years in healthcare administration and had left a large chain 2 years earlier, disillusioned with what he called profit over people. I saw what they did to you, he said, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. I read the case summary. It didn't surprise me. That's the worst part. I don't want what happened to me to be just a horror story people share over dinner, I said. I want it to be a blueprint for something better. He nodded slowly. Show me your blueprint, he said. I slid my notebook across the table. He read silently for several minutes, occasionally nodding or underlining a phrase. No marble lobbies, he read aloud. But outdoor gardens with accessible paths. Private rooms as default, not luxury. Transparent billing dashboards for families. Staff scheduling designed by staff, not just management. He looked up. You've got the heart of this nailed, he said. What you need is structure. Pro formas. Licenses. A property. That's where you come in? I asked. He smiled. If you'll have me. And just like that, a partnership began. We formed an LLC, Jameson House Senior Wellness LLC. I invested $2 million of my settlement as seed capital. David negotiated with banks and investors for a modest line of credit, using my funds as collateral but maintaining my majority control. We found a property on the edge of town, an old small hotel that had gone out of business during an economic downturn. It had 24 rooms, a central dining area, and a courtyard begging for plants. The bones were good. It needed work, but not reinvention. As we walked through the dusty halls, I ran my fingers along the banister, imagining residents' hands there instead. Can we widen the doorways? I asked. Make room for wheelchairs without scraping knuckles? Yes, David said, taking notes. Can we put handrails in the bathrooms that don't look like prison bars? I added. Yes. Can we make sure the beds are positioned so residents can see out the windows from their pillows? Yes. The renovation took 9 months. Contractors came and went, leaving behind the smell of sawdust and paint. I visited often, wearing my compression stockings and leaning on my cane, supervising like one of the charge nurses I used to be. We chose warm colors, soft but not dull. We installed large windows. We bought mattresses that didn't feel like punishment devices. We ordered blankets, hundreds of them, in deep blues, greens, and burgundies, made of fabric that felt like a hug. On a whiteboard in the makeshift office, I wrote a sentence in big letters. No one begs for a blanket. We hired staff carefully. David handled interviews for the operational side, while I interviewed for the care roles. I can teach you how to change a bed, I told one young aide candidate. I can't teach you how to see a resident as a person, not a task. Do you understand the difference? She nodded, eyes serious. Yes, ma'am, she said. My grandmother raised me. I know what it means when someone stops being seen. We implemented training that included not just clinical skills but also communication, empathy, and burnout prevention. We set up anonymous feedback channels so staff could report issues without fear. As the opening day approached, local news caught wind of the story. Former exploited nursing home resident opens her own senior residence, one headline read, "Free." They interviewed me on camera, in the courtyard of Jameson House, the freshly planted flowers bright behind me. Why did you decide to do this? The reporter asked. I looked into the lens, knowing my son might see this somewhere. Because I remember what it felt like to be cold and invisible, I said. And I refused to let anyone in my care feel that way. How much did you invest? She asked. $2 million, I said, not flinching. Money I got back from a system that took advantage of me. I'm putting it where it should have been all along, into real care. The day Jameson House opened, the sun was bright, a gentle breeze moving through the trees. We had 18 residents on day one, many of them coming from facilities like Oakview. Some walked in on their own, some arrived in wheelchairs, some came in vans with family members hovering anxiously. I greeted each one by name, shaking their hands, looking them in the eyes. Welcome, I said. You are not a room number here. You are you. Inside, the air smelled like fresh paint and roasted chicken. The sound of soft music played in the background, not loud enough to drown out conversation. Staff moved deliberately, not rushed, their ID badges showing first names in large letters and roles in smaller print. That evening, after the last family had left and the building settled into a calm hum of voices and footsteps, I stood in the hallway, watching a nurse gently tuck a blanket around a resident's shoulders. The resident smiled, already half asleep. No one was begging. My heart felt both full and fragile. We had done it. Not perfectly, there were already small hiccups, but honestly. And somewhere across town, my son sat in a rented apartment, facing the consequences of his choices, while his mother built something he had never imagined she could. I thought about him often, more than I wished I did. I wondered if he felt regret. I wondered if he told people he had made a mistake or if he still justified his actions. I didn't know it yet, but soon I would find out. Because the story was not done. The past has a way of knocking on your door, especially when you've finally found a place worth protecting. And when Daniel finally walked through my office doors, the balance of power between us would be so different that he might as well have been a stranger. But he wasn't. He was my son. And that made what came next both harder and more necessary. It happened on a rainy Thursday, almost 3 years to the day since he left me at Oakview. Rain traced slow rivers down the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office at Jameson House. The sky was a soft gray, the kind that made the gardens look greener. Residents moved through the common areas in comfortable clothes, some heading to a painting class, others to a chair yoga session. The air smelled like coffee and cinnamon rolls from the kitchen. I was at my desk, reviewing the monthly report. Our occupancy rate had climbed to 92%. Staff turnover was lower than industry average. Family satisfaction surveys were filled with comments like, "For the first time, I don't feel guilty leaving my mother here," and "They treat Dad like a person, not a bed." We were not perfect. We had made mistakes. But we faced them honestly, adjusted, apologized, improved. That alone set us apart from most places. A knock at my door pulled me from the numbers. "Come in," I said. David stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His expression was unusual, tight, serious, a little pale. "We have a walk-in," he said. "Asked to speak to the owner specifically." "That's not unusual," I said, gesturing at the chairs we kept in the reception for families. "Tell them I'll be out in a minute." "Do they want a tour?" David hesitated. "It's not exactly that," he said. "Margaret, it's your son." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. "My son?" I repeated, the word tasting strange in my mouth. "Daniel Hayes," David confirmed. "He's in the lobby. He says he needs to talk to you. He looks rough." The room seemed to tilt, just slightly. My mind flashed to the last time I had seen Daniel in person, standing in Oakview's lobby, his hand on my shoulder, his eyes avoiding mine. He had been well dressed then, his hair neat, his watch expensive. I had imagined seeing him again many times, imagined what I would say, how I would feel. In some fantasies, I forgave him easily, and we cried together. In others, I threw his apologies back in his face. In none of them had he walked into the place I built, needing something, while I sat behind a desk with my name on the door. "Do you want me to tell him you're unavailable?" David asked gently. "You don't owe him this conversation." I took a slow breath. My heart was pounding, but my mind felt oddly clear. "No," I said. "I need to see him." I stood carefully, smoothing my burgundy blazer over my blouse. My reflection in the glass wall showed a woman who looked older than the mother he had abandoned, but also stronger. My hair was shorter now, cut into a neat silver bob. My posture was straighter, supported by both my cane and a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in years. "I'll be in the lobby," I told David. "If you see anything that looks like it might need a witness, join us." He nodded and walked with me down the hall. The lobby of Jameson House was designed to feel like a living room, not a reception area. There was a fireplace, electric, but warm in appearance, bookshelves with real books, and soft chairs arranged for conversation. A bowl of individually wrapped mints sat on a side table. A large print on the wall read, "Dignity is not an upgrade." Daniel sat on the edge of one of the chairs, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. When he looked up and saw me, he froze. Time had not been kind to him. The man in front of me looked older than his 42 years. His hair, once thick and dark, had thinned and receded. Deep lines carved paths from his nose to the corners of his mouth. There was a slight puffiness around his eyes that spoke of too many restless nights and maybe too much drinking. He wore a suit, but it didn't fit quite right. The jacket was a little too tight across the shoulders, the pants slightly frayed at the hem. His shoes needed polishing. "Mom," he said, standing quickly. His voice cracked on the word. For a moment, my heart squeezed with the old reflex, the urge to comfort, to rush forward, to soothe. It was a habit built over decades, a muscle memory of motherhood. But then, like a film overlaying another, I saw him in Oakview's lobby again, turning away from me. I let the two images sit side by side in my mind. "Daniel," I replied calmly. "You're a long way from home." He looked around, taking in the space. His gaze flicked to the front desk, where the receptionist had discreetly retreated to give us privacy, then to the residents moving slowly in the hallway beyond. "You own this place?" he asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and something else, maybe envy, maybe resentment. "I do," I said. "It's called Jameson House." He swallowed. "I saw you on the news," he said. I didn't believe it at first. "They said you used the settlement to build this." That you're some kind of entrepreneur now. The word sounded awkward in his mouth, like it didn't belong next to my name. I prefer owner or founder, I said mildly. But yes. I built this. With help. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. He started, then stopped. Can we talk somewhere private? Part of me wanted to say no. To tell him that the lobby was good enough, that he had forfeited the right to closed-door conversations when he signed over my life without consent. But another part, the part that had chosen transparency as a core value, knew I didn't want this conversation whispered in shadows. We can talk in my office, I said. With the door open. He flinched, just barely. Okay, he agreed. We walked down the hall together. My cane tapped rhythmically on the floor. His steps were uneven, as if he couldn't decide whether to walk ahead of me or behind me. Once in my office, I sat behind my desk and gestured to the chair opposite. The glass wall looked out onto the garden, where two residents were sitting under a pergola, deep in conversation. Daniel sat slowly, his posture stiff. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Up close, I could see small details I had missed in the lobby, the thinning at his temples, the faint tremor in his right hand, the way his shoulders hunched as if under a weight he couldn't set down. So, I said. What brings you here after all this time? He winced. I deserve that, he said. I know I do. That's not an answer, I replied. He took a deep breath and let it out shakily. Things have been hard, he said. After the settlement, after I had to pay back the money, we lost the house. The cars. Lauren left. She said she didn't sign up for financial ruin. I had to move into a small apartment. I lost clients. My reputation took a hit. People talk, you know. His tone carried a hint of self-pity that sparked anger in me. Oh, people talk, I said. About the man who emptied his widowed mother's accounts and left her in a cut-rate nursing home while billing her insurance for services she never received? I imagine they do. He flinched. It wasn't. I didn't think, he struggled, searching for words. It got out of control. At first, it was just moving things around. Optimizing. That's what everyone does in finance. Steals from their mother? I cut in. His mouth snapped shut. For a moment, his eyes hardened, a flash of the defensiveness I knew too well. Then it faded, replaced by something closer to raw exhaustion. You're right, he said quietly. I stole from you. I told myself I deserved it after all I did for you after Dad died. I told myself you didn't really need that much, that you'd be fine in a home, that I was just speeding up what would happen eventually. He rubbed his face with both hands. I was wrong, he said. I know that. The investigation, the court, the settlement, it forced me to see it. They questioned me for hours. They showed me every form I had you sign. Every transfer. Every claim. There was nowhere to hide. Good, I said. He looked at me, pain in his eyes. I lost everything, he continued. The accounts. The house. My marriage. Friends. Even some family. No one wanted to be associated with that guy. He swallowed hard. The only person I couldn't lose, he added, his voice breaking, was you. But I did. And that's the one thing I don't know how to fix. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. Why now? I asked at last. It's been years. Why come here today? He hesitated, his jaw working. I've been sick, he said finally. A small, cold finger of dread traced down my spine. What kind of sick? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He looked down at his hands. I was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease 6 months ago, he said. Stage 4 now. They say I may need dialysis soon. Eventually, a transplant. The words hung between us like a familiar story I had once heard about someone else's family. Ironic, isn't it? He added with a bitter half-laugh. The man who took everything from his mother now needs something from her. My stomach tightened. Is that why you're here? I asked slowly. To ask me for. No, he said quickly, shaking his head. No. I know after everything. I don't have the right to ask you for your kidney. I wouldn't. He looked up, his eyes wet. I'm here because I can't keep pretending you don't exist, he said. And because, he swallowed. Because I need help. Just not the kind you think. I narrowed my eyes. What kind of help? He gestured vaguely toward the window, the building, the garden. This, he said. You did this. You took what happened and turned it into this. A business. A mission. A place where people actually want to be. He shook his head, almost in disbelief. I'm drowning, Mom, he admitted. Between medical bills, low-paying contract work, and the cost of just staying alive long enough to get on a transplant list. I don't know how I'm going to make it. And then I saw you on TV, talking about dignity and care and second chances. And I thought, maybe there's a way we could find some kind of, I don't know, redemption? For both of us? The word hit me like a physical blow. Redemption, I repeated. You think working for me would redeem you? I'm not asking for a job, he said quickly. I know that would be too much. I don't expect you to trust me with anything here. Not after what I did. He took a shaky breath. I'm asking to learn, he said. To volunteer. To do something useful. To put my skills to work for something that isn't just about squeezing profit out of vulnerable people. He laughed bitterly. I used to be good at finding efficiencies, he said. Making systems run smoother. If I could help you with that, even in a small way, maybe it would be a step toward, I don't know, being a better man before I die. My mind spun. This was not the confrontation I had rehearsed in my head. I had imagined anger, denial, maybe a half-hearted apology and a request for money. I had not imagined a broken man asking to be allowed to do penance in the shadow of what I had built. I thought of the residents here, the families who had entrusted us with their loved ones. I thought of the staff, the delicate culture we had cultivated. Bringing Daniel into this space, in any capacity, would be a risk. I also thought of the boy he had been. The one who had clung to my leg on the first day of kindergarten. The one who had cried when his goldfish died and insisted on a funeral in the backyard. I thought of something else too, the principle that had guided everything in Jameson House. People are more than the worst thing they have done. We said it in staff training. We said it about residents who had been cruel in their pasts. We said it about families who had neglected their elders out of ignorance, not malice. Did that principle apply to my son? Did it have to? I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of the decision settling on my shoulders. You want to volunteer, I said. Doing what, exactly? Anything, he said quickly. Filing, cleaning, maintenance. I don't care. I need to be part of something that isn't rotten, for once. His desperation was both pitiful and infuriating. So you come to the woman you stole from, I said slowly, and ask her to give you access to the one healthy thing she's built since escaping the mess you made. He closed his eyes briefly. When you say it like that, it sounds selfish, he said. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm not capable of being truly selfless. But I am capable of working. Of showing up. Of not stealing. Of letting you set whatever boundaries you need. He looked at me again, his gaze steady, for once. If you say no, he added, I'll understand. I'll walk out that door and never bother you again. I'll figure something out. But if you say yes, even in a small way, I promise I will take whatever crumbs of trust you give me and treat them like gold. Silence filled the office, thick and heavy. Part of me wanted to scream at him. To ask where this humility had been when I sat in that freezing room with mold in my drawer. To throw his words back at him and tell him he was years too late. Another part, the part that had held the hand of 1,000 patients on the brink of death, recognized the look in his eyes. He was terrified. Not just of me. Of time. Of the horizon rushing toward him faster than he had ever expected. I have conditions, I said at last. Hope flashed across his face, quickly tempered by caution. Anything, he said. First, I said, you will never, under any circumstances, have access to our financial systems here. Not as an employee, not as a volunteer. You will not see our bank accounts, our billing, or anything that could even tempt the part of you that once thought optimizing meant stealing. He nodded. Understood. Second, I continued, if you volunteer here, you will do the kind of work that reminds you every day of the cost of what you did. That means hands-on tasks that serve the residents. Wheelchair maintenance. Room setup. Laundry. Yard work. Things that are not glamorous, but necessary. You will not be in a position of authority. He swallowed. Okay. Third, I said, you will sign a formal agreement acknowledging your past actions and committing to full transparency here. That document will be shared with our leadership team. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded again. Fine. And fourth, I added, my voice softening but my gaze unwavering, you will not call me Mom while you're on these premises. To you, in this building, I am Ms. Hayes, the owner. Not because I don't love you, my voice caught slightly. But because this place is not about our relationship. It's about the residents. They come first. His face crumpled for a moment, then steadied. I understand, he whispered. Outside these walls, if we ever get to a point where that word fits again, I added quietly, we'll revisit it. He took a shaky breath. Does this mean, he began? It means I am not slamming the door in your face, I said. But don't confuse that with forgiveness. You are at the very beginning of a long road. You don't get to skip steps. Tears welled in his eyes. I'll take the long road, he said. It's more than I deserve. We arranged for him to start the following week, 2 afternoons as a volunteer under the supervision of our maintenance manager. When he left my office, David slipped in. Are you sure? He asked gently. No, I admitted. But I'm sure of this, if we truly believe people can grow, we can't only apply that to strangers. Sometimes, we have to apply it where it hurts most. David nodded slowly. We'll keep a close eye, he said. And we did. In the weeks that followed, Daniel showed up on time. He wore simple clothes, no fancy watches. He cleaned wheelchairs, changed light bulbs, assembled furniture. Residents knew him as Mr. Daniel, the volunteer, not as the man who had once almost destroyed their benefactor. I watched from a distance. I saw him kneel to fix a loose wheel on Mr. Alvarez's chair. I saw him quietly pick up a dropped blanket and fold it neatly at the foot of a bed. I saw him stand in the garden, listening as Rose told him stories about her youth, not knowing his connection to me. At the end of each day, he would stop by my office door. Ms. Hayes, he'd say. I'm heading out. Thank you for the opportunity to help. Some days, I only nodded. Other days, I asked a brief question. How are your kidneys? How is dialysis? He answered honestly, without dramatics. It's hard, he admitted one evening. I'm tired all the time. The doctors say I'm on the transplant list, but there's no guarantee. I've been reading about living donors, but he glanced at me and looked away. I'm not asking. I'm just reading. He didn't ask. And I didn't offer. Not because I didn't care whether he lived, that question gnawed at me late at night, but because I had learned, the hard way, that my body, my life, my choices were mine. He had to learn that too. One evening, months into this fragile arrangement, we sat together in the garden after his shift ended. The sun was low, painting everything in gold. The air smelled like cut grass and jasmine. I saw you talking to Mrs. Jenkins today, I said. She seemed happier than usual. He smiled faintly. She was telling me about her husband, he said. How they used to dance in the kitchen. She said she misses having someone to dance with. Did you dance with her? I asked. His eyes widened. No, he said quickly. I didn't think. You can, you know, I said. Sometimes the smallest kindnesses are the ones we're most afraid to offer because they expose something soft in us. He looked at me, something unreadable in his gaze. I don't know if there's anything soft left in me, he said quietly. There is, I replied. You're here. We sat in silence for a while. Do you hate me? He asked suddenly. The question was blunt, naked. I thought about it. I hate what you did, I said. I hate that you saw me as a burden instead of a person. I hate that you made choices that forced us into courtrooms instead of conversations. I took a deep breath. But hate is heavy, Daniel, I added. And I've carried enough heavy things in my life. I am choosing, every day, to set some of that down. Not for you. For me. Tears spilled down his cheeks. I don't deserve that, he whispered. No, I agreed. You don't. That's what makes it grace, not payment. He looked at me, eyes searching. Will you ever forgive me? He asked. I looked out at the garden, at the residents enjoying the evening air. I don't know, I said honestly. Forgiveness is not a switch. It's a path. Some days, I feel closer to it. Other days, I feel far away. What I can say is this, I am open to the possibility that, one day, when I look at you, I will see more of the man you are now than the boy who betrayed me. But you have to keep showing me that man. He nodded slowly. I will, he said. And for the first time, I almost believed him. 2 years later, Jameson House had grown into something even my old notebook couldn't fully contain. We expanded to a second location in a neighboring town, using a similar small-scale model, 22 rooms, central garden, warm blankets, transparent billing. Our reputation spread quietly at first, through word of mouth, then more loudly as families shared their relief online. We were not the biggest player in senior care, not even close. But we were a proof of concept that another way was possible. Daniel's health stabilized somewhat with dialysis. He continued to volunteer, then, after long discussions and careful boundaries, we brought him on part-time in a strictly defined support role, logistics, inventory tracking, non-financial systems. He never had access to money. He never asked for it. He became known among the staff for his reliability. Among the residents, for his patience. Among the families, as that man who always seems to show up when something needs fixing. Our relationship remained complicated. Some days, when I looked at him, I still saw the man who had sat in my dining room and slid papers across the table, lemon pie crumbs on his plate. Other days, I saw the man who carried Mrs. Jenkins's laundry basket when her hands shook too much, who stayed late to shovel snow from the walkway so wheelchairs wouldn't slip. We had long conversations and long silences. There were apologies, some clumsy, some profound. There were moments of connection and moments when old wounds flared. Forgiveness, I learned, was less like a thunderclap and more like a series of small, stubborn choices. And then, one spring morning, as the dogwood trees outside my office bloomed with white flowers, I woke up and realized something startling. I didn't think about Oakview first thing when I opened my eyes anymore. For so long, that place had been the lens through which I saw everything, every decision, every fear. It had been the dark backdrop that made my new life seem bright. But now, when I woke up, I thought about the residence breakfast menu. I thought about staff schedules. I thought about the new music program we were piloting. I thought about the grant application we were submitting to fund more community outreach. The trauma was still part of me. It always would be. But it was no longer the center of my story. It was a chapter, not the title. One afternoon, after a board meeting, I sat alone in the garden, a blanket over my lap despite the mild weather. Old habits die hard. I watched a nurse help a resident adjust their sweater. I watched Daniel kneel to tie a shoelace for Mr. Alvarez. I watched birds hop along the edge of the fountain. I thought about the journey from that freezing room with the moldy drawer to this place. If someone had told me, on the night I begged for a blanket, that I would one day own a chain of senior residences worth over $8 million, I would have laughed until my chest hurt. The gap between those two realities was almost absurd. And yet, here I was. Not because the universe decided to reward me. Not because justice is always neat. But because, in the darkest moment, I allowed someone to open a drawer I had wanted to keep closed. Because I said yes when Carla asked if I wanted questions asked. Because I didn't let the shame that wasn't mine silence me. Because I refused to stay cold. You might think this is a story about money. About how a discarded mother became a millionaire and built an empire. That's the kind of headline that gets clicks. But sitting there in the garden, listening to the murmur of voices and the rustle of leaves, I knew better. This is a story about choice. About the day I chose to let my humiliation become evidence, not a secret. About the day I chose to see myself as more than a victim. About the day I chose to build something instead of just surviving something. People often ask me now, in interviews, what's the biggest lesson you learned from all of this? They expect me to say something about forgiveness, or resilience, or justice. And those things matter. But my answer is simpler and fiercer. Never outsource your worth, I tell them. Not to your children, not to a spouse, not to a system. The minute you let someone else decide what you deserve, you hand them the pen that writes your story. I also tell them this. Family is not just blood. It's who shows up when you're shivering in the dark. For me, family turned out to include a tired nurse who finally decided to open a drawer, a social worker who refused to stop documenting, an investigator who believed an old woman's story, and a former administrator who chose to build something new instead of cling to the old. And yes, in a strange, painful way, it also includes a son who failed spectacularly, then spent every remaining day trying to build something decent with what time he had left. Because that's the other truth I've learned. Redemption is not a straight line. It's a messy spiral. Some people make it partway and stop. Some circle back to their old ways. Some fall, get up, fall again. What matters is not perfection. It's direction. One evening, years after our first conversation in my office, Daniel and I sat together in my living room at home, the television murmuring softly in the background. "Mom," he said quietly. I looked at him. He didn't correct himself this time. "Yes," I replied. "I know I don't deserve it," he said. "But, thank you. For not letting my worst act be the last line in our story." I thought about all the lines that had followed, the legal documents, the business plans, the volunteer schedules, the blankets tucked around tired shoulders. "Thank yourself too," I said. "You showed up. You did the work. You didn't run away from the hard parts this time." He smiled sadly. "I learned from the best," he said. I shook my head. "No," I replied. "You learned from the worst. And you chose differently." That's what matters. Now, when I walk through the halls of Jameson House, I sometimes catch glimpses of my reflection in the windows, an older woman with a cane, a determined set to her jaw, a softness in her eyes she fought to reclaim. I am not the same person who whispered for a blanket and apologized for needing it. I am also not some flawless hero. I am a woman who was hurt and chose to turn that hurt into something useful. And you? Maybe you've never been left in a nursing home. Maybe no one has stolen your savings. But have you ever been made to feel small in your own family? Have you ever been told you're too much when you ask for basic kindness? Have you ever convinced yourself you should be grateful for crumbs when you baked the whole cake? If you have, then you know this story is not just about me. It's about you. And every person who has ever mistaken suffering for loyalty. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. You are allowed to ask for more than a thin blanket. You are allowed to open drawers other people want to keep closed. You are allowed to rebuild your life at 69, or 79, or 89, on your own terms. As long as you are breathing, your story is still being written. Don't let anyone else hold the pen.